Hello, thanks for checking out my video. Today we're just going to be using these simple shapes worksheets in a couple different ways, really any which way you choose, to trace and then cut out the shapes. I put out some additional materials that could be used outside of our traditional tracing and cutting out. We could use the shapes template here with some Play-Doh and kind of make little strips along the shapes there and lay them inside the boundary to work on our spatial orientation and some kind of good visual perception skills. I can use my glue if I really want to be working on kind of squeezing and building up a little grip and pinch strength. I can use a glue bottle to trace along these dotted lines here just while squeezing out some glue, or the same could be used here with the glue stick, except we're not squeezing, we're using kind of a built-up handle, just a wider tool here than your traditional crayon or pencil, and we will be developing some good fine motor skills, maybe a little tripod grasp here, and we can use our glue stick much like a pencil or a pen. And then we can also use this sheet protector right here. It's kind of like a laminated sheet, and we can slip our paper into the sheet, and then we can use a dry erase marker if we want to practice tracing the sheet a little bit before we use our crayons or some other permanent sort of writing utensil. And if you are more of a traditionalist and you'd like to stick to just your standard crayons or marker or pencil, that's okay too. We can clear all of that off to the side and just use regular paper and a writing utensil of your choice. For me, I'd like to use this sheet protector, the laminated sheet, to maybe show some different variations of this activity. So I'll start with the squares and the sheet protector. I will get my writing instruments out of the way, and I will be working with Play-Doh to start, and I will just make a couple different shapes here just to practice. It's always a really good idea to have your child be as independent as possible and work on some skills along the way that maybe aren't necessarily associated with the task at hand. But what we need to do is to get this Play-Doh out. So if you want to encourage your student or your child to kind of pinch some of these pieces out, that would be okay. We're working on a good pincer grasp. If you want to encourage them to use both hands and dump it out, that's good. That's some good bilateral coordination. And even now, as I'm kind of pinching out the side of this, I'm really developing some good grip and pinch strength here with my left hand, my non-dominant hand, and it just kind of doesn't really want to come out, so I'm going to help it with my dominant hand here until we get all the Play-Doh out, and then we can begin our exercise with the Play-Doh. So the first thing I'll do is take off a piece of Play-Doh, and maybe I can roll it out onto the sheet here or just onto my table, or even in my hands, and develop some good bilateral coordination until we have something that resembles a line here. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we'll just kind of lay it down, and we can get another one and do the same process here. Again, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for some good bilateral coordination. I'm looking for some good spatial orientation here as I used my Play-Doh to construct the shape here with these visual cues that I'm using with my worksheet. So these little dotted lines here along the square will provide a nice visual cue, and then the bold lines on the outside will provide a nice visual cue for my boundary. And I will go ahead and just finish this last one here, and then we'll say that we are done making a square. Now that you have the square with the Play-Doh boundaries, you can use a dry erase marker to color within your boundaries, and you're getting a nice tactile cue here from your Play-Doh, so you know that you are within your boundaries. So you're coloring in the square with your Play-Doh boundary, and you can remove the Play-Doh, and voila, you have a square that has been colored in. And if you're all done with the Play-Doh, you can squeeze it back into a ball, get some good proprioceptive input as you're squeezing, work on your grip and pinch strength, and then put it back into your container if you're done with it. And you can put it off to the side. And then you can use a dry erase marker if you want to leave your paper in this sheet protector. You can use a dry erase marker and really just trace along these lines here. We are going to use these red dots here as a visual cue so that I don't really have to search for the entire length of the line. I'm just kind of searching in segments with my eyes and following along this trail. And I'm going to reposition my hand. I'm using my non-dominant hand to stabilize the paper. And I'm just tracing along these lines all the way down, all the way across. And then I can do the same thing with this second one here. So I'm going to draw a line down, draw a line across, draw a line down, and draw a line across. And these boundaries are separated by about 3/4 of an inch. I guess maybe it would probably be about 1/2 inch in between these. So any deviation from this dotted line outside of a bold line would be 1/4 inch of an error. So we want to stay within this margin here, within these boundaries. So if we go a little bit off our mark here, and we're just a little bit off our dotted line, we know that we're still within our boundary if we stay within this bold line right here. So that's one way that we can use this worksheet to determine a margin of error. Once I'm done with the square worksheet, we can put this off to the side, maybe for practice later. We can work with it later. We can move on to the triangle worksheet, which offers us an opportunity to use diagonal pen strokes. So we'll be doing horizontal and 2 diagonal pen strokes with the triangle. It's a little bit more complicated than our straight lines, perpendicular and vertical and horizontal with the square, and not quite as complicated as the circle. So we'll leave the circle for last, start with the square, move to the triangle, then move on to the circle. And we could do the same exact thing that we just did with the square. We can do that with the triangle. So we're still using this sheet protector here as just a practice tool. So we'll go ahead and we can use the Play-Doh again. I love Play-Doh, love working with Play-Doh. Or I'm just going to jump straight into this tracing component of it. I'm going to use my dry erase marker. I'm looking for maybe an extended finger grasp or a brush grasp, and I'm using a tripod grasp when I can. If your child has not quite developed that yet, we really want to be working towards that. So maybe encourage a little bit of this marker resting in the thenar web as opposed to in the palm. So we want to move away from the palm, slide the marker up a little bit into the thenar web so it's supported by the hand, and that'll help us to really start using these fine motor skills that we want to see with writing. So we'll encourage that, and you can go ahead and just start tracing along the dotted lines again because we're practicing tracing our shapes. And then once you're done with this worksheet with the sheet protector, we can take it out of the sheet protector and we can do our tracing on the paper itself. And I love these sheet protectors because the dry erase marker just wipes right off. It's really perfect for that. And then we get to go ahead and use our paper with, say, a marker or a crayon to continue working on this, maybe almost working towards some scissor skills here. So we'll do the scissors next. But right now, let's use this sheet here, sheet of paper, with these nice visual cues here of the red dot and the dotted line inside of our margin. We're working on stabilizing the paper with our non-dominant hand, positioning our hand so it's resting on the table. We don't really want anything floating. We want it nice and stabilized on the table here. And we're going to go ahead and complete this triangle. And then once we have this triangle completed, we can move on to the next triangle. This one has slightly fewer visual cues, but the same sort of format here, the dotted lines with the red dots. And I'm going to continue to trace along my visual cues, stabilizing the paper with my non-dominant hand, having my dominant hand with the writing utensil stabilized on the table, sliding along, using some good visual motor integration skills to complete this tracing activity. Now that I'm done tracing my triangle, I can go ahead and move this out of the way, or I can just jump straight into cutting it out with my scissors, but I'm going to move it out of the way, and I'm going to use my next worksheet here, the circle worksheet, and we can do this the same exact way. We can slide it into our sheet protector. We can use the dry erase marker to do the practice. We can use Play-Doh to construct a shape, or again, we can use things like glue, which I'm going to do right now, to work on our grip strength and pinch strength. So for this one, maybe I won't really use my scissors to cut it out while the glue's still dry. But again, I'm shifting the focus of the activity from working with a writing utensil to now working on grip and pinch strength. So it's an easy transition here, and I'm going to use the same visual cues that I was using with the markers. I'm just going to use that with my glue. So I'm going to squeeze, get some nice graded muscle force here. I'm not squeezing too much. You can regulate the flow of the glue by just twisting the top a little bit. So if I twist it all the way open, it's more likely I'm going to spill the glue out, especially if I don't quite have graded muscle control. But I want to use just the right amount of force here. So if I close it almost all the way and I squeeze really, really hard, I only get just a little bit of glue out. So that's really not teaching us graded muscle force here. We really want to be mindful of just the right amount of flow here. So not too much, not too little will encourage our student to use graded muscle force. So just the right amount of force there. Just squeeze out the right amount of glue. I'm still not quite there. I'm going to go one more turn. And now we're ready. This might even be a little bit too much. But I'm using my graded muscle force to regulate this in addition to this little regular top. I'm using just the right amount of force, so I'm not squeezing out a ton of glue as I do this, and I'm also not too light with the glue. I'm using just the right amount. So now that I've worked with a couple different methods of writing utensils and maybe a little glue here, we're really working on some great fine motor skills in a couple different ways. But I'm done with this worksheet. Me personally, I'm done with this worksheet. If you wanted to continue on, say you have some glitter or something and you wanted to put some glitter in the glue, that would be okay. For me, the circle worksheet is done. I've used it the best that I can. So I'm going to go ahead and move back into my triangle and my square. I'm done with my triangle worksheet, so maybe I'll just put this off to the side and complete my square worksheet with, say, the glue stick. So now I have a different tool that I'm using, and I will go ahead and encourage my student to unscrew the top and to twist from the bottom. And now I'm using a thicker instrument here and a shorter instrument as well. So I'm really kind of encouraging a little bit more fine motor use here with this. I know a lot of students would take this opportunity to maybe kind of revert back to like a pronated grasp. But really I want to encourage them just to go ahead and pinch with their fingers and then pinch onto the glue stick, stabilizing our paper with our non-dominant hand. And then we're just going to trace with our glue along the same boundary there. We could do it a couple times. And then we can cut out the square from the bottom if we wanted to and match it to the top. So I think I'd like to do that right now. maybe I'll trace this first. Maybe I'll do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and trace this line, and then I'm gonna get it ready, and I'm gonna cut it out and glue it onto my other square. So I've traced that one. I've got a little bit of glue on this. I'm gonna get my scissors out now, and I'm gonna just do a little rough cut just to get this kind of process going here. You can help your student with that part if they're not really sure about the concept here of why we're just getting some of this excess paper out of the way. That's fine. We'll get that out of there. We're going to orient our scissors correctly. We can cut on the outside. We can cut right along this red line here, or we can even cut on the inside. I'm going to cut right on this red line because, again, that's going to let me know that I'm within a certain margin of error one way or the other of this dotted line. I'm going to stabilize the paper with my non-dominant hand. I'm really going to encourage some good bilateral coordination as I'm turning the paper using my scissors to cut the square out. And once we have that cut out, we can glue it onto our paper. So maybe I want to do another pass with the glue stick. That's totally fine. Stabilize the paper with our non-dominant hand. Use our glue stick with some good visual motor integration skills here. And then we can even do a little bit of matching. There we go. Now we have a square that we just matched with our other square. Now that we have our square that we cut out and glued onto our other square, we can get this paper out of the way, and we can do the same exact thing with our triangle if you'd like, or we can cut out both of the shapes and do a little bit of visual discrimination, which one's the square, which one's the triangle. These are all great ways to use these very simple materials. So that's it for today's activity. Very simple tracing activity using these very simple shapes that I made on my computer very easily. And we're just working on a variety of different skills, pincer grasp, dynamic tripod grasp, some really great scissor skills, some visual motor integration with the tracing. We're working on some spatial orientation skills with our Play-Doh, and we are also working on some grip and pinch strength with our glue. These are all different variations of this activity that we can do with just these little worksheets. So I hope you found this video useful, and please feel free to contact me if you have any questions on how to implement these strategies with your student.